Hey, welcome everyone. Here we are on broadcast number 3 for FIBI Live Chat. And I've got one of the partners of FIBI with us, David Coe. How are you doing today, David?
Doing great, Alice. How about yourself?
Doing good. It's a little smoky over here, as you know, and maybe not everybody else knows. I'm out in Ventura County, and it smells pretty much like a campfire. We've had some pretty unfortunate events out here, a lot of wildfires, et cetera, and it's really affecting, the climate out here. But hey, we still are in California, so can't complain. Wanted to talk about a little bit about an upcoming meeting you're having, David. Really interesting. You titled it "The Green Opportunity: Cannabis and Real Estate." But before I touch on that, I want to just kind of share a little information that I know about David, because our audience may not know a whole lot about you. I know, I've known David through the real estate channels for quite a while now, but you have a pretty strong background in marketing. Is that right, David?
Yeah, I started in college, had a degree in advertising, and worked for an agency called Team One, which is part of Chiat Day. Was one of the kind of original people on the launch of Lexus.
Right.
And then also worked in an agency called Chiat Day for years, but got the real estate bug about 10 years ago, and have been full-time in real estate ever since.
Wow. So Chiat Day, that's a pretty major marketing company. They're pretty well known. I know that name. Driving by in Venice, the Chiat Day famous building, right?
I did my internship in the old Binocular building in Venice
No kidding.
a long time ago.
Oh, no kidding. Well, I'm sure that you've used a lot of your marketing training to help your clients in real estate. I know that you're also a agent and broker out there in the South Bay, and that must be a huge benefit to your clients out there with all that marketing background you have.
Yeah, I mean, real estate is, people think of it as a property business. It's really a people business.
Right.
And really, part of being a successful, any kind of real estate business that you're in, you've got to develop leads. And when you've got product, you've got to market it and sell it and expose it to as many people as possible. So my marketing background, which I thought had no translation into my real estate career, actually had a huge amount of overlap once I was full-time into real estate.
Right. And, I know that I benefit from it, and FIBI benefits because you bring this really strong marketing background and marketing brain to whatever we try to do with FIBI and spreading the word. So, you're a really strong partner on the team, so I'm glad you're on my side. So let's talk about this green opportunity, the cannabis and real estate meetup that you have coming up. It's, January 10th. Right.
Speaking of California and smoke, what a
yeah, nice segue, David. I was going to throw in a really bad joke and say, hey, maybe we should have started this broadcast at 4:20, but I figured, no, that's just too easy. Let's just do it at the regular time at 4 o'clock. So it says the great opportunity, cannabis and real estate. You and Matt are going to be hosting that, and you've got quite an established panel here, very well-known people. I know a couple of people on this panel as well, but let's start out with, you have Vanita Spalding is one of the panelists. She's a managing director at Cogent Valuation. 30 years of experience in valuation services, litigation, et cetera. Wow, that's just amazing. Now, how did you put together this guest panel on your own, or did you have some of your other people put this together?
No, I actually I did have some input on it, but
okay.
As I think we talked about a couple weeks ago, you and I are in Provisors.
Right.
Provisors is a networking group that you and I belong to. Right. Both Vanita and Ken are people that are in Provisors.
Right.
And we originally had the idea of doing this panel in January. Of course, everyone knows, as of January the 1st here in California, recreational use of marijuana is now going to be legalized.
Right.
And it has created this, green rush where people are trying to get involved in investing in real estate and other forms of cannabis-related industries.
Right.
So, I started asking around Provisors. Both Vanita and Ken were people that came highly recommended as, great potential panelists for this, for this event.
Perfect. Yeah, it's going to be amazing. I mean, could you imagine having this type of insider outlook and information, just approaching the subject? Because I know that there's been quite a bit of interest in this whole sector. I mean, look what happened in Colorado, and I think also in Washington, right? It really has significantly changed their economies, and Yeah, just to have someone with that type of depth of insight, with Vanita with her valuation experience and Ken with his legal background,
Mhm.
that should really be a pretty exciting and informative session. So I hope people make it out there. See who else you have on the docket there. You've got
Jason Post.
Jason Post. Yeah, he runs a investment firm, right? So tell us a little bit about Jason and what he brings to the discussion.
Yeah, I mean, Jason runs a very large multifamily business. I believe they have over $500 million in multifamily investments scattered throughout the U.S.
Okay.
Jason has been involved in different cannabis opportunities, mostly in Colorado. I think some here in California as well.
Uh-huh.
And one of the passions that he has as an investor is in this space. He sees it as a huge opportunity. I think he sees this as something to expand his investing into beyond multifamily.
Right. Perfect. We briefly touched on Ken Burke, but let's expand a little bit upon him. I know he's got a tremendous legal background, and from what I know, and please add or correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I know about what Ken's been doing, he's been really addressing the issue of banking and the cannabis industry, because there's because of the federal statutes, et cetera, that becomes very problematic for businesses to operate in that type of environment. So tell us a little bit about Ken's expertise.
Yeah, like as we like to do whenever we have an event, we always have three panelists, and we try to get panelists that have a bit of a different slant on whatever the topic is. So in particular for this panel, we've got Vanita, who basically she does business evaluations. She does a lot of expert witness work and appraisal work in businesses, and one of her vertical specialties is the cannabis industry.
Oh, okay.
Jason, we talked about, is a full-time investor who's looking at investing and creating investment opportunities in real estate. And Ken is an attorney, and you
Right.
are absolutely spot on. Ken is a part of his legal work is navigating some of the hurdles you have at a federal level.
Yes.
Banking is a huge hurdle in this space. And Ken, we wanted this particular panel, of all panels, we needed to have an attorney that really understood the law and is actively advising clients in this space. So we think we just got a home run panel.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, I couldn't think of a better legal expert than Ken to get involved in this panel and to really add a whole ton of value to this discussion. So yeah, congratulations on putting that together. Now, this whole movement of cannabis in California. I know that the law is going to change on January 1st, but I've been following this not just as out of curiosity, but also from a investor's standpoint. And a lot of cities still don't have nailed down the regulations of how they're going to handle this. They're still kind of in flux. It feels like they're still kind of deciding, okay, where are we going to allow this to happen in our city, the zoning, et cetera, locations, how are we going to govern this? What's the oversight going to be? And I mean, this is coming in just in a couple of weeks, right?
Well, yeah, and a lot of cities are still completely unclear on how they're going to manage this and how they're going to handle this.
Right.
But a lot of cities are not and have figured it out and are issuing licenses. And I think what you're going to see is the initial wave of this thing. There are a lot of proactive cities. I believe Long Beach is one of them.
Okay.
That they have cleared the way for, there's really two parts, I think, to the cannabis industry as far as how it relates to real estate.
Okay.
Clearly have the dispensaries,
Yes.
and which will now kind of be storefronts, right? I think it goes they change the environment now that it's you don't need a prescription to be there.
Right.
And then you've got the spaces where people are going to manufacture or grow the plants.
For production.
So one of the things that I thought was really interesting, because this is an area that I've got a lot of experience in at all, which is why we're doing a panel on it.
Yeah.
In Colorado, when this first happened, the price on rents, especially for small manufacturing, like quadrupled. right?
Right. Yeah.
But what happened is, as the industry got more girth and had more players into it, the
Mm-hmm.
price of marijuana dropped from like $4,000 a pound to $1,000 a pound. So
Really?
one of the things that, other people that are investing in the space, a tip, from an investing standpoint, is that if you are going to lease the space, this is not the kind of space that you want to rent on a long-term lease. The pricing on all of this is going to fluctuate, especially here in California. This is a multi-billion-dollar market, and there's so much interest that's going to flood in here. So people that are rushing into the space, maybe this isn't the type of environment where you're looking at a 10 or 15-year lease. You may want to have a little more flexibility, especially early on. We're trying to figure out, where things are going to, kind of settle down at.
That's a really great point, David. I didn't really think about that because it is so in flux that if you as a landlord were to lock yourself down in a long-term lease and then you start to see this huge demand for this, I mean it's absolutely going to be a limited special use space, right? You've kind of shot yourself in the foot. You haven't allowed for that type of flexibility to adjust to the market. Maybe in haste because you have somebody that's ready to take down, a lot of square footage for a certain amount of time. So that's something I didn't really, put a lot of thought to. Curiously enough, I was having a lunch with some other Provisors members, and we were talking about this topic. And one of the things they talked about was that the difficulty of people in the cannabis industry finding landlords willing to rent for them because there's a lot of fear because of the federal statute and how that may affect a landlord that allows this type of business, even if it was zoned or even if it's permitted. What is the unknown factor and risk going to be to a landlord who allows this to happen in their building? So they talked about that. Most of the way that they're steering these cannabis businesses is, hey, if you can purchase, that's the best way to go. And then, the discussion gets even deeper and deeper. It's like, okay, who's going to lend to these companies that want to purchase, right? So,
right, which I think is going to create opportunity, right? Like, so
absolutely, Good point.
You've got quite a few, I think, hedge funds and those types of businesses out there that are going to fill that void that traditional banks won't fill with private equity. So I think that's another opportunity to profit in this space, is going to be filling that void. You also mentioned the fact that you've got a lot of businesses that may want to have a cannabis-based tenant in there.
Right.
I think what you can't lose sight of, and when you have a rush like this, right, everyone's kind of coming in very excitedly, is you still have fundamentals that you have to be weary of.
Right.
And I kind of look at cannabis very similar to like Airbnb, which, by the way, is another panel we're going to be looking at. We're actually going to be doing a short-term rental panel in March. Airbnb has kind of revolutionized some aspects of leasing because of the high amount of income you can get, but it's also an industry that's up against a lot of litigation, right?
Yes.
And you buy a piece of property in a community, then all of a sudden they outlaw short-term rentals.
Right.
If you didn't fundamentally buy the property to withstand losing that benefit, you're going to get yourself in a lot of trouble. And I'm sure that's one aspect I know it's an aspect we're going to talk about because I'm going to ask the question.
Right.
How do you pay attention to the additional income that you might be able to get, but not get yourself overextended where if there is a change or something happens that, you're looking at losing all your money?
That's an excellent point. This is just so new to our, California and how this is going to happen. I mean, we can look at, like you said, you could look at what happened in Colorado and, maybe make an assumption that something similar will happen. I know that a good an investor friend of mine from the Denver area said he wishes that he went back then and put options on a bunch of, commercial property because it was just, he said, that's what you have to do. But, it's not always that simple, right? It may not necessarily follow the same path because I've spoken to other people about the actual production of cannabis in California and said, well, in California we are a very difficult state to produce anything in, so we might be a higher cost producer, so it may not it may not benefit to be a producer here as much, but like I said, this is so new, and what an opportunity for anyone that is an investor or just curious about this whole sector to come down to El Segundo on what day is it again? It's on the 10th, on Wednesday, and let's see, you guys start at 6:30. It says networking at 6:30, and that's at the Point in El Segundo. Then you have introductions, and then the panel should start around 7:25, 7:30, and then you go until 9 o'clock. And don't you have something like after the meeting or something like that where you kind of do some after networking?
Yeah, so we hold this panel or our FIBI meeting in my Keller Williams office, which is in the Point.
Right.
Well, inside the Point, there's also an Italian restaurant called North Italia, and we rent out the outside patio. We buy some food. It's a cash bar, but once the meeting's over, we invite everyone to go, basically across the courtyard to have some food and to spend some time networking. And Ellis, I don't have to tell you this, but you know the real magic of FIBI. The education is great, but it's the networking where you really get the value long term out of FIBI. So we tried to create a space that was very conducive to quality networking.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. That is kind of like the secret sauce, is that it's not just the education, but it's the combination of the education and the one-to-one connections that you can make in this amazing organization that, I don't want to pat myself on the back, but I want to say that I've just been awestruck at how many people have responded and really supported our organization over the last 10 years, and I've created so many great connections, and it's helped me both as a person in business and also as an investor. So we really encourage you guys to come out and check it out for sure. Let's see, what else do we want to bring people up to date on? We've got so you've got an Airbnb coming up in March now. It sounds like your FIBI is really kind of focused in on the panel type of format. Tell me a little bit more about when somebody goes to your meeting and they sit down and they see a panel. I've seen so many testimonials of how much people enjoy it, but tell us why people really enjoy that format at your meeting.
Yeah, I think we're a little different than other FIBIs in that a lot of them have one speaker who will get up, and maybe they'll have a speaker that'll stand up. They'll give an economic update. Then they'll have a primary speaker that will talk about the topic. Picture a room full of people with a big PowerPoint in front that people are presenting from.
Right.
Our vision for the South Bay was FIBI unplugged, right? Yes. Other than a microphone, no one brings a presentation, nothing is canned, and we wanted to create an environment where we felt like there was some give and take back with the audience. Right. So it's definitely panel style. It's more discussion than presentation. We don't ask any of the panelists to present or prepare anything, and we try to pick people that we feel are active in the space every single day. Right? They're not people that are on the speaking circuit that are coming to pitch something or sell something. I think Ken's like a classic FIBI panelist. He's just an attorney that works in this space all the time, and this may be the only speaking gig he does about real estate investing the entire year on this particular topic. Right. And we don't want him to come give us a speech or sell us something. We want him to come answer questions and lend his expertise. Yeah,
you really have an expert talking about the subject that you're right. He's not a person that is on these, convention junkets to talk about something and sell something. He's like in the trenches. You can't get anyone better than that, especially in industry. And when I look back at your different meetings, I see this has a common thread of all your guests. It's like you get these really amazing insiders that basically they just talk shop, right? And what I really enjoy, because I was on one of your panels once, is I just like kind of the natural energy that happens when there's this back and forth between panelists. It's something that you don't get when there's just maybe a single person presenting to the audience. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's a very similar philosophy to Provisors, right? Like in Provisors, whenever we go to a meeting, you don't ever go and have like a coffee or a lunch with one other person. You always do it with two other people, right? When you add that different dynamic, it's amazing how it can somehow push the conversation in a spot that you didn't necessarily think about going into it, and make it that much more meaningful. And we think the same thing happens in the panel. You've been a panelist multiple times, and when you're there, you know that you probably had a couple of things you were going to talk about, and then all of a sudden someone else said something that you didn't even think about, but you had something that was very relevant in your background, and you had some information to share on that you could react to. So I think it creates this very organic conversation about the topic that we're in within our panel format. And I think it feels a lot more natural and relevant and believable to the audience.
Absolutely, absolutely. And have you had any sort of feedback, or I shouldn't say feedback, but kind of has anyone launched any questions about the cannabis industry that you definitely said, well, that's something that I definitely want to have our panel address? Besides some of the stuff we've already talked about, are there like some, because you were just kind of touching on how when you have these conversations, it's something that you never thought about, and then, and now you're like, oh gosh, I definitely have to ask the panel this. Are there any other questions at the top of your head that you think are going to be some very cogent topics that you want them to cover on the panel?
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about the risk factors of this, right? I mean, we talked a little bit about the fact that you've got banking risk, which the using debt in real estate is a great way to grow your returns, and the cheaper debt you can get, usually the higher the returns are. Well, this is an industry that debt isn't very prevalent in. So how do you handle that?
Right.
I think the discrepancy between being legal on a state level, not legal on a federal level, and even at a city or county level, right? Like, you may have certain communities where it's allowed and certain communities where it isn't. So I think understanding how to navigate that part of it is going to be something that's interesting. I know we're going to spend some time talking about the storefront retail aspect of it versus the manufacturing production side of it, and understanding what the differences look like in those two spaces. And then I think we're also going to spend some time talking about, maybe investing more passively in syndications and different kinds of opportunities that are going to be looking at this kind of space, and maybe what are some things that you need to be some additional parts of your due diligence that you should be doing if you're going to explore an investment into this, into this vertical.
Oh, that's a good point. That's something that I'm sure Jason Post will be able to add a lot to, right?
And Ken, right? I think Ken also will have a lot of insight on that as well.
Oh, yeah. Good points. I see we have a couple people I know out in the audience. We have Sean.
And by the way, Ellis, anyone else listening to this, if they have a couple of questions they feel are relevant, leave a comment. I'll go through and read that. And if we have a couple of good comments here, we'll absolutely pull those out and put those in our questions.
Oh, that's a really good point. We should use this as a great way to interact with our FIBI community. And yeah, if you have any questions, I used to call them burning questions when I was leading my FIBI group. So if you have any burning questions or stuff that you want David to make sure he interjects into the discussion, we'll put them up here. I know you guys also broadcast on Facebook Live your meetings as well. Is that going to happen with this Green Opportunity Cannabis and Real Estate event?
It is, and one of the things that we're working on for FIBI as a whole for 2018 is looking at taking that content and expanding it online. Right. So, taking the actual recording, how do we carve that up into podcast? How do we take that into something that can be read? How do we take that into something that can be watched at a later date? So it's one of the initiatives that, that Ellis and I and Matt and Jeremy, the four of us that run the brand, are really taking a hard look at it 2018. We realize there's only, 60 or 70 seats in each of our meeting, but we think that the information is a lot more relevant, similar to Facebook Live. I think this is the start of the brand trying to get online and share the information to a wider audience. So absolutely, we're going to be looking at taking all this content and trying to get it online so we can reach a larger audience.
That's a great point. Yeah, I think we're just at our infancy as far as FIBI goes, as far as really utilizing all these different channels to kind of reach out, because we do have some very unique content and experiences that we'd like to share. I mean, just, some of the stuff that I look back on, and there's so many nuggets in some of the videos that you have done on the broadcast that you've done. I'm like, oh my gosh, I wish I had known that. And it's just kind of like, all these gems all over the place that, through the 10 years, I mean, I can't even imagine how much knowledge and wisdom is in those 10 years of meetings that we've had, right? I mean, multiply that by the chapters. That's just amazing to think about.
Yeah, I got an email today that I'm sure you've gotten before. I get this about once a month. I've got an email from someone I've never met who
Right.
had a boss who speaks on real estate.
Uh-huh.
And on the pulpit, the boss talks about some kind of real estate class they take. It's $159, and here's the revenue split that you get as the chapter leader, and they get to keep. And most of the bio was all how we were going to share the money, and these people's preaching from the stage to sell their class.
Right.
And my response back was very similar. I'm sorry, we don't allow selling at FIBI.
Right.
So I think it's such a key difference for people that don't know us to understand that's not who we are.
Right.
And that email wasn't even someone we responded to as far as becoming a panelist, because that's not the kind of people we're looking for. And if you think about that philosophy, times 10 years,
Right.
times 10 groups, I mean, that's an amazing amount of education over the years that we've been able to offer to our followers.
That's a really good point. I just want to say, give a shout out to some people I recognize out there in the audience. We have Buddy Broom out there, a good friend of mine, and also an amazing investor and educator. He's been teaching classes on using the financial calculator and the math behind investments. So I want to say hi to Buddy. I want to say hi to James FIBI. I don't know if I know you, but I want to thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast. I saw a good buddy of mine, Sean Gorham, who is a contractor and investor as well. Want to do a shout out to him. We're rounding out here toward the end of the show, but any last thoughts about what you want to share with the audience? I mean, I think we've touched upon how we've really put a lot of energy into making our meetings different. It's really about putting our community members first, all the members of FIBI, to really focus on education, education first, not the old model of, hey, what can we sell them, right? Because we have nothing to sell at FIBI. All we do is we're just investors that want to learn just like you guys do. So anything you want to add to that, David?
Yeah, actually, interestingly enough, I took a class from Buddy just last week or a week ago on seller financing.
Yeah, he taught down at down the South Bay, right? Down at your office.
He came down to my office, right? So, even me, a guy that runs real estate investment clubs, I still go get educated, right? Buddy was coming in talking about a topic that I thought was interesting. So I think it's terribly important as an investor that you're constantly getting information. You're constantly hearing new things. None of us know everything, and the more experienced you are, you may know a lot more than other people in the room, but hearing some new ideas, it just may open up your eyes, and that's what we really feel that the community of FIBI is all about exposing each other to new ideas, new thoughts, and hopefully collectively we don't act collectively, we act independently,
right.
But collectively we can all become better investors, based on everyone's knowledge. So, encourage everyone to come check us out.
Yeah, and to close this out, I want to share something that was shared with me with one of my mentors, Gary Johnston, who taught both Buddy and I more about the financial calculator. And he said, investing is a team sport. So, we'll leave it with those words of wisdom from Gary Johnston. And I've really learned from that motto. And to this day, I always use it, and I enjoy sharing information and, considering my investment community my team. So we are going to close this out. It is Friday afternoon. I already went to see the new Star Wars movie last night, so I have to figure out what else I'm going to do this weekend.
And how was it?
Oh, thumbs up.
Yeah.
No spoilers here, but yeah, it was amazing. My son and I, we went out 10:30 last night, and we were one of the first people to watch it in our area, so it was good times.
Nice.
All right, David, have a wonderful weekend. Thanks again for joining me on here, and I'm going to definitely try to make it out, as I think everyone should if they have interest in the whole shift in the cannabis industry in California. And I want to wish you a wonderful weekend and good luck investing out there. We'll see you next Friday. Take care, guys.
snappy.
Make sure I close this out.